On World News Tonight, Sumeru awakens. Indonesia raises alerts to the highest level and villages are evacuated as volcanoes erupt on Java Island. Major change. After months of protesting, has Iran's government disbanded the notorious morality police? Find out tonight. COVID curbs. Protesters win a partial victory as Chinese cities start to loosen COVID controls. And festive season. 'Tis the season of New York stores to show off their creativity in the form of holiday windows.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Anuradhi Vikramasinghe.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on World News. We're starting off in Indonesia as Mount Semeru erupted, spewing hot ash clouds a mile high and rivers of lava down its side, while sparking the evacuation of nearly 2,000 people, exactly 1 year after its last major eruption killed dozens.
Clouds of hot ash 15 kilometers high darkened the horizon and covered nearby villages. Mount Semeru in Indonesia erupted once more, sending lava down the mountain. Almost 2,000 people were forced to flee.
It's raining in my village now and you can't see anything. It's raining volcanic ash. I don't know. The most important thing is to run away from the village to save my family.
This latest eruption on the Indonesian island of Java began at almost 3 a.m. local time on Sunday. Authorities raised the volcano's alert level to 4, the highest there is, amid fears of further bursts of hot clouds, lava flow and mudslides of volcanic debris. Residents were warned to keep an 8-kilometer distance from the volcano and evacuees were moved to shelters.
When it's safe, we can ask them to return to their homes. But if it's still not safe, they have to stay at our shelters.
The last major eruption at Mount Semeru exactly 1 year ago killed at least 51 people. It's one of the nearly 130 active volcanoes in Indonesia and is the tallest and among the most active. Earlier on Saturday, Java was also hit by a 6.1 magnitude earthquake, less than 2 weeks after another deadly quake that killed over 300 people. The archipelago sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, making earthquakes and volcanic eruptions like these commonplace.
Over in Iran, there is confusion, some optimism and a lot of skepticism about possible major changes to women's rights there after months of deadly protests over strict dress codes. There is word that the government may be giving in to calls of more freedom.
Tonight, after months of widespread protests, possible cracks in Iran's strict Islamic system. The Attorney General saying at a press conference the feared morality police, who for decades have enforced a severe dress code on the women of Iran, has now been disbanded, and that the parliament is reviewing a law requiring women to wear hijabs or head coverings. His claim has not been officially confirmed by Iran's government, and activists are skeptical, saying the morality police had already been forced off the streets by demonstrators.
The Iranian people managed to shake the regime, and that's why they come up with the idea saying that, okay, we can think about getting rid of morality police.
Women in Tehran tell that since the protests, they've felt new freedom, able to go with their hair uncovered, largely without interference. The U.S. sanctioned the police last month, and tonight the White House warning the eyes of the world are on Iran. The human rights abuses inflicted by its government must not go without consequence. The morality force has been the target of public anger since the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died in their custody. Her death, the spark for 2 months of protests. Iran's government says 200 people have been killed in the demonstrations. Human rights groups say the real figure is more than twice that.
Now, oil prices have risen after major producers agreed to continue to cut output, and the G7 and its allies agreed to cap the price of Russian oil.
Russia, the world's second largest oil exporter, will not sell oil that is subject to a Western price cap, even if it has to cut production. Russia's deputy prime minister made the announcement Sunday after the G7 and Australia agreed on Friday to a $60 per barrel price cap on Russian seaborne crude oil, prohibiting shipping and insurance companies from handling cargoes of Russian crude above the cap. The price cap aims to reduce Russia's income from selling oil and prevent a spike in global oil prices, while pressuring Russian President Vladimir Putin over his war in Ukraine more than 9 months into the brutal conflict. Russia called the cap a gross interference that would destabilize global energy markets. Putin in September warned the West he would cut off energy supplies if price caps were imposed, telling them that Europe would freeze. On Saturday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the $60 price cap on Russian oil is not serious and will do little to deter Russia from waging war in Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Russia continues to move troops to the front line, dashing hopes that Moscow intends to de-escalate the conflict. Russia and Belarus held talks as the Kremlin mobilizes more troops for combat.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko held talks in Minsk on Saturday where they reportedly discussed military cooperation and regional security. Although Lukashenko has consistently said he will not enter the war in Ukraine, Moscow has in the past used Belarus as a staging post for its invasion. Meanwhile, Russia continues to move troops to the front line, dashing hopes that Moscow intends to de-escalate the conflict. The Ukrainian armed forces reported that since Friday, the Kremlin's forces have fired 5 missiles and carried out dozens of airstrikes targeting Ukraine's military positions and civilian infrastructure. According to the UK Defense Ministry, Russia is likely planning to encircle the town of Bakhmut, where fierce trench warfare reminiscent of World War I has been going on for the past few weeks.
Shanghai took more gradual steps towards lifting its COVID-19 lockdown while Beijing was investigating cases. The World Health Organization is delighted to see China's adjustment on its COVID control measures and focus on the key task of getting its most vulnerable groups fully vaccinated. There are some people who are pleased with this measure, while some cast doubt on the logic behind the move.
A partial easing of the world's toughest COVID-19 curbs seemed to have sowed confusion across China on Monday. In the capital, Beijing, residents expressed mixed feelings about the changes. This man was pleased COVID tests are no longer required for public transport and hoped it's the first step towards reopening after the pandemic, while some others cast doubt on the logic behind the move.
They just change the measures when they want. For example, a mall could reopen on Saturday, but people were only notified on Friday night. It's very strange and surprising to me because there are more cases now, but they opened the mall. Yet dine-in is still banned, but I guess it'll be allowed soon.
3 years into the pandemic, China's zero-tolerance measures contrast sharply with the rest of the world, which has largely decided to live with the virus. The strict approach has battered the world's second-largest economy and put mental strain on hundreds of millions. On Sunday, dozens of students protested at a university in the central province of Wuhan against its COVID policies. The students could be heard demanding school officials make the process open, make information transparent. It follows a series of anti-lockdown demonstrations late last month in what was mainland China's biggest show of public discontent since President Xi Jinping took power in 2012. Although the protests largely petered out amid a heavy police presence across major cities, regional authorities have cut back on lockdowns, quarantine rules, and testing requirements to varying degrees. China will also soon announce a nationwide easing of testing and allow some positive cases and close contacts to isolate at home instead of a government facility.
Let's go in for a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back to World News Tonight. On the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says that the bloc will adopt a new aid package to support European businesses in order to counter the Inflation Reduction Act in the US.
The multi-billion US program to promote climate-friendly technologies in America, signed by US President Joe Biden in the summer, is prompting the EU to adopt state aid rules. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said the EU should revise and improve its rules to prevent investors going to the US.
So we must take action to rebalance the playing field where the IRA and other measures create distortions. In other words, we need to do our homework here in Europe, and at the same time, we have to work with the United States to mitigate competitive disadvantages.
The United States Inflation Reduction Act is a roughly $369 billion investment plan to build a new green economy, particularly in clean energy production.
Now, French President Emmanuel Macron said there was no reason to panic about possible power cuts this winter, but he called on citizens to use less energy and on state utility EDF to start nuclear reactors to prevent outages in case of cold weather.
As France braces for a series of power cuts this winter, French President Emmanuel Macron has sought to ease people's fears. In an interview recorded during his state visit to the US, the president discussed the government's work.
So the government is working, and rightfully so, to prepare for an extreme case. Yes, we will be able to get through this period, even with a cold December and January. It depends on us, and so my message is responsibility, but in no way panic.
Emmanuel Macron is insisting on the fact that people should stick to the government's plans, which includes a 10% reduction of people's usual electricity habits. Nevertheless, the president is trying to reassure people after growing fears from last week's announcements.
But this year, it seems that, and please note my use of the conditional tense, the electricity production and the demand would not be on the same level, especially on some days with very cold weather, and if we don't adapt some of our consumption habits when we're called upon to do so in the most critical moments.
The government also plans to carry out short and targeted power cuts in the event of extreme circumstances. Schools and public transport are amongst the many sectors that could be affected.
South Korean Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is back home following his trip to France, Mozambique and Ghana to rally support for South Korea's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in the southern port city of Busan.
Prime Minister Han Duck-soo recently completed his visits to France and 2 countries in Africa, Mozambique and Ghana, where he worked to gain support for the bid for the World Expo 2030 Busan and discussed possible cooperation. Han boarded the plane to South Korea on Saturday night local time from the capital of Ghana, ending his 8-day-long trip. In Paris, the Prime Minister delivered a presentation to the World Expo's governing body, BIE, to help with South Korea's bid to host the global event. In his presentation delivered in English and French, he said the World Expo 2030 Busan will present a new kind of expo, a sustainable platform for all humanity to resolve our shared challenges together. Prime Minister Han gave South Korea's case to host the World Expo to BIE representatives from 18 countries. The host will be announced next November after a vote by BIE members. Prime Minister Han next visited Mozambique and Ghana, both members of the BIE. There, he focused on sharing South Korea's vision for the World Expo. Han also discussed strengthening cooperation between the countries and South Korea. Han spoke with the president of Mozambique, Philip Nyusi, about a possible summit between South Korea and countries in Africa in 2024. The Prime Minister also spoke with the President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, and emphasized South Korea's will to support and invest in the country.
A protester and a policeman have reportedly been killed during rare demonstrations in the southern Syrian city of Suwaida. Crowds angry because of the worsening economic conditions in Syria stormed the governor's office.
People want to overthrow the regime. That's what these Syrian protesters were chanting outside the governor's office in the southern city of Suwaida on Sunday. Fueled by anger over spiraling prices and worsening economic hardship, the demonstrators held up signs demanding their rights and asking to live with dignity. This man could be heard shouting to the authorities, "You see how people are dying from starvation." Later, dozens of people stormed the building in the center of the Druze majority city. Syrian state media called them outlaws and said they set fire to files and official papers. Witnesses told the governor was not in the building. and that once inside, protesters brought down pictures of President Bashar al-Assad. A hospital source said at least one civilian had died from gunshot wounds. Syria's interior ministry said demonstrators also tried to seize the city's police headquarters and that one officer was killed in the ensuing clashes. In a statement, the government said, "We will pursue all the outlaws and take all legal measures against anyone who dares to undermine the security and stability of the province." Anti-government demonstrations have been rare since Assad crushed pro-democracy protests over a decade ago, and Soweto province has been spared the resulting violence seen in other parts of Syria, with a minority Druze sect resisting being drawn into the long-running conflict, which pits mainly Sunni rebels against Assad's rule.
We have some good news for you. More people are showing an interest in smart farming, which allows farmers to control the environment so that it's optimal for growth. Not only is the industry giving young people a second job, but also providing solutions to challenges like climate change.
It's become a recent trend for young people who care about the environment to get involved in smart farming. College graduates with a university degree in completely unrelated subjects, like journalism, are returning to their hometowns and starting smart farm businesses. Their personal interest in environmental and climate issues has prompted them to look for solutions, of which one approach is through eco-friendly agriculture. For such individuals, smart farming is gaining attention. Not only can they grow produce without the use of pesticides, but the cultivation and packaging also uses eco-friendly products.
The biggest advantage is that it is not only possible to take precautions against climate crisis or natural disasters, but it is also eco-friendly.
Smart farms can also grow medicinal crops like licorice and Korean angelica. Production is double and cultivation time half what it would be compared to being grown in an open field. For startups, the cost of labor is always a burden. But for these smart farms, the optimal conditions for growth, including temperature and humidity, are automatically adjusted and controlled by a computer.
One big advantage is that a couple can come on the weekends and take care of what used to require 3 to 4 days of work from 3 or 4 people.
Growing interest in smart farming has also led local governments to widen their support for startups in the industry. And to reduce the financial burden for young people, they have expanded education programs and a farm rental project.
It's meaningful that this provides an opportunity for young people to start a business without the burden of an initial investment for facilities. I hope this can contribute towards population growth and the revitalization of the local economy.
Smart farms make it possible to provide a stable supply of safe and eco-friendly agricultural products and mitigate the effects of climate change and natural disasters. And structured support from the local government can help these innovative startups succeed.
Welcome back, and for more news, let's take you around the world in a minute. Dozens of mourners marched in a funeral procession of a Palestinian killed by Israeli forces during an arrest raid in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The Palestinians carried the body near the city of Bethlehem and chanted anti-Israeli slogans. India's capital New Delhi was engulfed in thick smog as cooler weather exacerbated pollution, and the government banned private construction in and around the city to try to limit dust and emissions. The 3 astronauts aboard China's Shenzhou 14 manned spaceship returned to Earth safe and in good health. The return capsule carrying the 3 astronauts touched the ground at the Dongfeng landing site in North China's Inner Mongolia. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said it was up to the government's party National Executive Committee to decide his future in the face of allegations of misconduct against him. And that is all from us here at World News Tonight. Join us again tomorrow as we keep you up to date with the latest from around the world. In case you missed any of the stories tonight, you can watch the whole program on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/OtherThanEnglish. We're leaving you tonight with New York City stores sparkling with holiday joy and messages this Christmas season. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.